Showed up to Thanksgiving and heard my family roasting me in the kitchen. My mom smirked right to my face, so I told her if I'm such a joke, she can pack her crap and leave because she doesn't live here anymore. Forks literally froze midair. I walked into my own house and heard them laughing in the kitchen. God, she's pathetic, my mother said. Laughter, forks clinking. Then my father's voice. Can you believe she still calls it her house? That's when I stepped around the corner. Every head turned. My mom froze mid-sentence, her wine glass halfway to her lips. Oh, she said, smirking, you came. I didn't say a word at first. I just stared at them, my family, sitting at my dining table, eating food they'd bought with my money, surrounded by decorations I'd paid for. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. Then pack your things. You don't live here anymore. You could have heard a pin drop. My aunt's fork hit the plate. My little niece started crying. My dad leaned back like I'd just told a bad joke. You're serious? He said. I nodded. 1 week. Then I changed the locks. The silence burned. My mom tried to laugh it off, said I was being emotional. My dad called me ungrateful. Ava, my sister, just sat there, holding her daughter and looking confused. She had no idea what I'd heard. What none of them knew was that this wasn't about one dinner. This wasn't about the gossip or the jokes. It was about something I'd discovered a week earlier, something that changed everything I thought I knew about my own family. Because the house they were mocking me in wasn't just mine. It was supposed to be theirs. At least, that's what they'd planned behind my back. And by the time I realized it, they were already halfway through making it happen. My name's Claire Matthews, and I'm from Greenville, South Carolina. 3 months before that Thanksgiving disaster, my parents lost everything in a flash flood that hit their neighborhood. The water didn't just ruin the carpets or the furniture, it gutted the whole house. Insurance barely covered cleanup. They were suddenly homeless, and my mom called me sobbing, saying they didn't know where to go. Without even thinking, I offered them my place. My house was a 3-bedroom ranch on the edge of town, one I'd worked my ass off to buy. I told them they could stay as long as they needed. My sister, Ava, and her 2-year-old daughter, Maddie, came too. They were family. It wasn't a question. At first, it felt good to help. Dad fixed the gutters. Mom cooked dinner. Ava even offered to pay for groceries, but I refused. I figured it was temporary, just until they got back on their feet. But temporary turned into indefinite. They got comfortable, real comfortable. My mom started rearranging furniture, buying curtains without asking, even changing the Wi-Fi password to something easier to remember. I brushed it off. I told myself they were just trying to make the place feel like home. Then the money requests started. A few hundred for gas, 500 for repairs, 1,000 for medical bills that turned out to be their dog's dental cleaning. They'd always phrase it like a favor to the family. You know we'd do the same for you, Claire. Except they never had. When I asked Ava about it, she looked stunned. They asked you for that much. Mom told me you offered. That's when the first chill ran down my spine. My own parents were lying to both of us, telling her I was generous, telling me she was needy. I didn't know what the angle was yet, but I knew they were playing a game. By late October, they weren't asking anymore. They were expecting. My mom even joked, "This place feels more like home every day," with that tone she used whenever she was testing boundaries. I ignored the pit in my stomach, until the day I found an envelope on my kitchen counter addressed to the Matthews family estate. My name wasn't on it. At first, I thought it was junk mail. But when I opened it, my blood went cold. It was a letter from a local attorney, about a transfer of deed request. The same house I bought 2 years earlier. The same one they were living in. And the signature line, my dad's handwriting. I sat at my desk staring at that letter for a solid 10 minutes before I could even breathe right. It wasn't some casual form. It was official, typed, notarized, dated. A draft deed transfer, naming my parents as co-owners of my house. I kept reading the fine print, hoping I'd misunderstood something. But no, it even had the property parcel number from my mortgage papers. They'd gone as far as contacting a lawyer. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe they didn't mean to send it. Maybe they just wanted to ask about the process. So I called the attorney listed on the bottom of the page. He sounded polite but cautious. "I'm sorry, Miss Matthews, but I can't discuss client matters." I said, "I'm the homeowner." He paused. "Then you may want to check with your family." I was told this transfer was a family agreement. And then he hung up. That's when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a setup. They were trying to take my house. When I got home that night, my dad was on the couch watching football, beer in hand. My mom was cooking like everything was normal. I stood there, letter in hand, shaking. "What is this?" I asked, dropping it on the counter. She barely glanced at it. "Oh, just paperwork. Your dad was looking into options. We thought maybe it'd make things easier for insurance or taxes. By putting your names on my house," she blinked, feigning confusion. "Well, technically, we all live here now, Claire. It's a family home." That word family made me want to scream. My dad chimed in, "You're being dramatic. We were just exploring ideas." "Exploring?" I snapped. "You forged my name." His eyes flicked away. He didn't deny it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I could hear them whispering in the living room long after midnight. "Ava texted me around 2 a.m. They're talking about you. About the house." I didn't respond. I just lay there in the dark, realizing how far they were willing to go. The next morning, my mom acted like nothing happened. She made pancakes for Maddie, humming, setting out plates like we were one big happy family. Then she looked at me across the table and said, "You really should learn to trust people more, Claire. You're so defensive lately." I wanted to laugh. Defensive? They were plotting to take everything I'd worked for. By the end of the week, they started acting like the house was already theirs. My dad invited his buddy over to look at the garage space. My mom started talking about repainting my bedroom. Even Ava seemed uneasy. She'd started texting me from work instead of talking at home. The tension grew thicker every day. So when Thanksgiving came and I told them I'd be at my boyfriend's family dinner, it wasn't a lie. It was strategy. I wanted to see what they did when they thought I wasn't around. And what I found out that day in my own kitchen, it wasn't just betrayal. It was a plan years in the making. After Thanksgiving dinner blew up in their faces, I couldn't stop thinking about that damn letter. How long had they been planning it? How far had they gotten? So, 2 days later, when things calmed down a little, I called the lawyer again. But this time, I didn't tell him who I was. I pretended to be an assistant confirming the Matthews estate paperwork. "I just needed one detail," I said, "to update the file." And he gave it to me. The date the inquiry was first made. Not last month. Not after the flood. 2 years ago. The same month I closed on the house. That hit me like a punch to the chest. I sat there staring at the phone, realizing that my parents hadn't stumbled into my generosity. They'd engineered it. The flood wasn't even the beginning. It was the excuse they needed to move in. That night, I drove to the old neighborhood, the one they'd supposedly lost in the flood. The house was still there, but something was off. The for sale sign out front wasn't water damaged or faded. It looked new, freshly staked. There were renovation permits taped to the window. It hadn't been destroyed. They'd sold it. My stomach turned. I called Ava. "Did Mom and Dad tell you they sold the house before the flood?" "What? No, they said the insurance denied them." "They didn't lose it. They cashed out. They've been sitting on that money while pretending they had nothing." Ava went silent. Then, in the smallest voice, she said, "Claire, I think I know where it went." She told me she'd accidentally opened one of Mom's mail envelopes a few weeks earlier, an account statement from a credit union. It wasn't in either of their names. The name on it was Maddie's, their granddaughter. My mom had opened a custodial account for Maddie's future, she said. Only the balance didn't look like a casual savings fund. It was nearly $80,000. All the money they'd begged for, the donations from neighbors, the help they'd gotten from me, it all went into an account under a baby's name. One they fully controlled until she turned 18. And that was when it all clicked. They weren't planning to just take my house. They were building their retirement out of it. They'd fake the loss of their home to get sympathy, get money, and plant themselves in mine until they could legally tie it to Maddie's name, making it look like a family inheritance. By the time Ava stopped talking, I was shaking so bad I could barely hold my phone. "They used both of us," I whispered. She just said, "Yeah, and they'll never admit it." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my car outside my own house until sunrise, staring at the front door, realizing every single thing inside that house had become evidence of their plan. That's when I decided, they wanted a long game, fine. I'd play one too, but mine would end with them gone and broke. I didn't say a word to them for 2 days. No texts, no calls, just silence. I needed time to think, really think, because if I went in angry, I'd lose. My parents were experts at flipping the script. They'd play the victims, and I'd end up the ungrateful daughter. I'd seen that movie too many times, so I decided to do something they'd never expect from me. I'd smile, nod, and start playing dumb. That weekend, I went to the house with a few grocery bags, acting like nothing had happened. My mom looked surprised but pleased, the way she always did when she thought she was back in control. "You're staying for dinner?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Figured we could start fresh." For the first time in weeks, everyone was relaxed again. My dad grilled chicken in the backyard. Ava sat quietly, avoiding eye contact. I watched them laugh and thought, this is what snakes look like when they think you're not watching. After dinner, my dad cracked open a beer and said, "We should revisit that deed idea sometime. Keep things simple legally." I smiled. "Yeah, maybe after the new year." Inside, I was already 10 steps ahead. That night, I opened my laptop and started pulling bank records. Since I owned the property, I had access to every utility, tax, and insurance document. I wanted proof of how they'd been freeloading. I also started tracking Venmo and Zelle payments. They'd always said those were for family expenses, but the totals were sickening. Over $14,000 had gone from me to them over the past 8 months. Then I made a call to a realtor I knew through work. I told her I might be considering selling, and she offered to run an appraisal. I told her to keep it quiet. The house had jumped nearly $60,000 in value since I bought it. I knew what that meant. If they were banking on claiming it later, I could strip it out from under them before they even realized it. Meanwhile, I started dropping little breadcrumbs. "Oh, I might refinance soon," I'd tell my dad casually. Or, "The insurance company wants updated signatures from all residents," I'd tell my mom, sliding papers across the counter. They didn't know it, but every form they signed was a confirmation they were tenants, not co-owners. I had everything notarized. And Ava, she was in on it now. She'd started recording conversations with our parents, ones where they bragged about how smart they'd been to move in with me, how they'd secured their future. My mom even said, "Claire will cave like she always does. She doesn't have the stomach for a fight." They were wrong. I was calm, methodical, patient. I opened a new savings account and started moving small chunks of their rent payments into it, money I'd secretly started charging them without them realizing. Every bill they'd asked me to cover, I billed them back for it quietly. When my dad complained about the rising utilities, I told him inflation hit everything. He nodded, grumbling. By December, I had enough documentation to prove everything. The forged signature, the fake flood story, the financial manipulation. I even had proof of the secret account in Maddie's name thanks to a photo Ava took of one of Mom's statements. But I wasn't going to court. Not yet. No, my plan was better. They wanted a family estate. I'd give them one. Just not the one they'd planned to inherit. By the time Christmas rolled around, the tension in the house felt like static electricity. My parents were still pretending everything was fine, Mom baking cookies, Dad pretending to fix a leaky faucet, but they were too quiet. Too controlled, the calm before something ugly. Then one night, Ava called me. Her voice was low, shaky. "Claire," she said, "Mom's been in the garage every night. She says she's organizing, but I heard her talking to someone." I frowned. "To Dad? No, to someone else." That's when she told me what she'd seen. My mom standing by the car, phone on speaker, talking to a man she called Alan. "I heard her say something about paperwork, about making sure the signatures matched," Ava whispered. "And then she said, she won't even notice until it's too late." I pulled over on the side of the road. "Did you hear a last name?" "No, but she called him our guy at the bank." I didn't sleep that night. I dug through my files, my mortgage papers, everything. Then I found it, an email from my lender about a loan assistance inquiry. It was from a few weeks earlier. The person listed as the requester wasn't me. It was my father. And the name of the contact assigned to his refinance advisor, Alan Monroe. They'd tried to refinance my house under their names. The next day, I went straight to the bank. I didn't make a scene. I just showed my ID, the deed, and the forged inquiry. The banker looked uneasy and said, "Ma'am, I can't discuss client applications, but I'll make sure this file is reviewed immediately." That was all I needed to hear. They hadn't gotten the money yet, but they were close. That night, I drove to my house again, pretending to drop off gifts for Maddie. I parked a few houses down and waited until I saw my dad's truck pull away. Mom was alone. I went in without knocking. She was at the table with a manila folder spread open, papers, signatures, copies of my driver's license, even my signature sheet from the original loan packet. "Where did you get that?" I demanded. She jumped, clutching the papers to her chest like I'd caught her holding contraband. "It's not what you think," she said. I stepped closer. "You forged a bank application, Mom." Her face changed. No shame, no panic. Just that slow, smug smirk I hadn't seen since I was a kid. "Don't be dramatic, Claire, it's still in the family." Then she said something that froze my blood. "You wouldn't even have this house if I hadn't signed those papers the first time." "What?" She laughed, soft, cruel. "You really think your loan was approved because of your credit? You were 27 with barely a down payment. You think the bank gave you $280,000 on a boutique income? No, sweetheart." Alan pulled a few strings. "We cosigned behind your back. Without us, this house wouldn't exist." I just stared at her, because suddenly it made sense. The low interest rate I thought was a miracle, the missing email trail during closing. How easily the paperwork had gone through. They hadn't been freeloading for months. They'd been laying the groundwork for years. They'd made sure my house was never fully mine in the first place. That was the night everything snapped into place. They thought they owned me, financially, emotionally, legally. But if my mom wanted to play paper games, she forgot one thing: I'd learned from her. And I was about to use every one of her tricks to end her reign for good. When I finally pieced everything together, I didn't feel anger anymore, just cold clarity. See, the house wasn't the endgame. It was the insurance. The thing they needed to hide something bigger and darker. It started when Ava called me crying one night, saying she'd gotten a letter in the mail from the IRS addressed to the Matthews Family Trust. She thought it was junk, but it mentioned a balance due, over $62,000 in back taxes. She sent me a picture of it, and there it was again. Alan Monroe's name, so I started digging. Public records, property filings, credit histories, everything. What I found didn't make sense at first. Then when it did, it made me sick. My parents weren't just trying to take my house. They were using it to wash money they'd stolen years ago from my grandmother. When my grandma passed, she left behind a modest estate, about $140,000, and her home. Everyone thought it went into probate. Mom said there was barely anything left after debts. I didn't question it back then, but the probate file told a different story. It was never finalized. The executor on record, my mom, and the estate bank account, closed just 3 months after Grandma's death, the same time my parents suddenly started fixing up their old house and paying off loans in cash. They'd stolen it, all of it. And when that money started running low, they needed a new plan, one that would keep them afloat without looking suspicious. So they invented the flood. Sold their house quietly, claimed it was destroyed, then milked me for help while funneling my money into that same trust account. That account in Maddie's name wasn't for her future, it was a shell. A safe. The cruelest part? They used their granddaughter's name to hide dirty money. I remember sitting in my car outside their house that night, staring at the glow through the kitchen window. My dad was laughing. My mom was stirring something on the stove, humming. They looked like two people who'd won. And then it hit me. They didn't just betray me for comfort or pride. They did it because they thought they'd never get caught. Because, to them, I was the easiest mark, the soft-hearted daughter with a guilty conscience and steady paycheck. The one who'd rather lose money than start a fight. That was their mistake. Because now I had every receipt, every forged signature, every transfer. And the same woman who thought she could steal a house from her own child was about to find out what it felt like to lose everything, slowly, and in public. I wasn't going to scream or threaten. I was going to dismantle them legally, financially, socially, piece by piece. And when I was done, they'd have nothing left to hide behind. I didn't want a cinematic takedown. I wanted a clean, slow, methodical unraveling that left no room for their excuses. So I did the most boring, painful thing someone can do to a con. I turned paperwork and patience into a guillotine. First, I handed everything to the bank, notarized copies and all. The banker I'd quietly tipped off put their refinance file on hold and opened an internal fraud investigation. They froze the suspicious account tied to Maddie's name and flagged the forged documents. The lawyers at the bank called me, very helpful. It felt obscene to be polite to people who'd stolen from me. Next, I filed a formal complaint with the county recorder's office and the state attorney general. I attached the recordings Ava had taken, the email trails, photos of statements, and the draft deed with my forged signature. I didn't dramatize anything in the reports, just dates, receipts, and facts. When you have paper, the truth sounds like a gavel. Word leaked the way it does in families, slow and ugly. Uncle Tim, remember him, started calling relatives, then cousins started showing up at Ava's house with casseroles and offers to testify. Someone quietly told a local reporter about the probate inconsistency. The reporter asked a few questions. By the time my parents realized what was happening, their story had already turned into a file on a prosecutor's desk. They lost access to credit as accounts were frozen and audits began. The custodial account for Maddie was put on temporary hold pending investigation. The nest egg turned into a flagged asset. The bank reversed several transactions after they found forged signatures and unauthorized applications. No sensational courtroom scene, just a stack of letters. Account under review. We are closing your line of credit. We require your presence at the probate hearing. Socially, they were gutted. Cousins who had once nodded at every holiday lie stopped answering their texts. The church ladies who'd once dropped off casseroles started asking awkward questions about donations. My mother's neighbor, one who'd always complimented her savvy, sent a curt message and blocked her on social. It was quiet, corrosive exile. Legally, the wheels turned. The county reopened Grandma's probate after I provided the missing bank records and transaction history. A civil suit followed for conversion of estate assets. The prosecutor's office opened a criminal inquiry into the forged documents and potential identity theft. I didn't relish that part, but I didn't flinch either. Justice isn't revenge, it's returning what was stolen and making sure the next mark is warned. My parents moved out before the hearing. They left in a packed truck with the same casual arrogance, but there was no dignity in it, just the look of people who'd miscounted how long their luck could hold. Ava stayed. She signed the lease on her own, enrolled Maddie in the daycare I helped pay for the first month, and finished setting up that little sunlit corner of her life. I used their last rent payment the way I'd been using them all along, to make sure Ava could breathe. I wired most of it into her daycare deposit and the small emergency fund I'd opened in her name. When she texted me a picture of Maddie asleep under a crooked hand-painted star, I felt something that wasn't triumph and wasn't peace, just relief. We don't speak to our parents. I don't know if the prosecutor will indict. I don't know what criminal penalties they'll face. Part of me wanted to let the law be the judge, and part of me wanted a savage public vindication. What I did get, in the end, was slower and cleaner. The things that mattered to them unraveled, the accounts, the respect, the quiet presumption that they could keep taking without consequence. On the last phone call they made before the line went dead, my mother tried the old weapon. We're still family. I put the phone on speaker and let it buzz while I made coffee. When she finally cried and asked for mercy, I answered like I always do when someone offers me their hand only after stepping on mine. No, I said. You lost more than money. You lost the right to ask for it back. She hung up first. 2 months later, Ava sent me a picture of Maddie blowing out a tiny candle on a cupcake. Her caption said, "We're good." I replied with one word, "Finally." And that was the only toast I needed.